A wonderful welcome to another one of our masterclasses. It's brought to you by Profitmaster Global Outsourcing, providing premium offshoring solutions. Terry Paule, welcome to our masterclass for today.
Yeah, good day, Paul. Thanks very much. Very generous as usual. Always good to see you. And I reckon you look younger every time I see you. So I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it. It's working.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you, my friend. So let's get into this. Maybe, are you okay to share a little bit about you? I know it was probably 2 or 3 years ago when I sat on the sofa with you and Spiro there. And, I loved the banter between the two of you. It was fantastic. But I got to know more about you and the family, which is amazing. Are you okay to share a little bit about that?
That's a big question. Come on, Paul. First question. Well, I don't know where to start effectively, but in terms of background, we actually go back a long way. The Paule family, migrants to Australia, so it's that classic migrant story. Literally off a boat, 2 suitcases, a couple of young kids, and it's not a unique story. A lot of, Australia was built in that sort of 50s and 60s with a lot of that migration. Coming to Australia and changing the dynamics, I guess, and that multiculturalism through the 70s and 80s. And the rest is really, really history. I guess Spiro and myself, there's only the 2 brothers. He's the older brother. He's the smarter brother, the better looking brother. He does everything much, much better than me. All you got to do is ask him, right? And
About to say, you just got to ask him.
Yeah, he'll tell you each and every time. Don't you worry about that. But essentially, we've sort of bonded together and built a few things along the journey, including, I guess, today's main focus being the Findex business. It's sort of a startup that somebody once said, it took you 30 years to get there, but I think we got to, out of the garage and into a decent sized business, impacting a lot of communities across Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, brilliant. Mate, one of the things that I've always noticed about you is your positive outlook to life in general. You okay to share a little bit about how you stay positive in life and run your life?
Yeah, look, I can get grumpy. Just ask some of the people around me, but generally, I guess it's a sort of selfishness in a way. You may have heard of this term that seems to be going around at the moment around mindfulness, and a lot of people confuse that with sort of meditation. But mindfulness is actually being in the moment, having a discipline. It's almost a muscle you've sort of got to practice. And I like to start my days early. I think I'm a classic early starter. It doesn't mean I finish early. I unfortunately burn the candle at both ends, which can be a problem. And I always try, literally every single day, including this morning, to focus on a good positive thought the moment I wake up. I'm not sort of a grumpy person when I get up. I get up and try to think good positive thoughts until something comes and affects that. Now, it could be stupidly looking at your emails too early in the equation and people raining on your parade, and it doesn't take long before someone affects that orbit. But it is that moment of clarity where you can control, focus on something you can control, create a momentum, if you like. A lot of people, without getting too kumbaya about it all, I think that mindfulness is that if you look too far into the past, in your life, you tend to get depressed. A lot of people spend too much of their time there. But if you look too far into the future, particularly in things you can't control, you get anxious. So this mindfulness, this staying in the moment, this focusing on control, I think is something that people can learn and practice. So that's really how I like to roll, and it probably gives me that momentum to have a better day rather than a bad day.
Yeah, well done, well said. Let's talk about the Findex brand. The change. Let's talk about the change from Crowe to Findex, the systems, the processes, the tech, the culture, even the culture about building a brand new brand. How difficult was that?
Findex has been around a long time. It was actually born on my dining room table back in 1987. And back then, it's almost pre-digital when you think about it. The world was sort of discovering computers and I remember, we're probably still operating in DOS, green screen DOS in those days. And I came across a concept which I actually don't like the term, and some people may have heard me say this before, but I use it because it sort of sums up where the foundation was. It was a concept of a one-stop shop, one place to have many services effectively. So that was really the birth of it. And in fact, the original name was Financial Index. It was Financial Index Australia, actually.
Yeah.
And over time, the marketplace basically morphed it into Findex. So it sort of developed out of the back of that. And really the concept was around almost like an index in a book where you could have one most trusted relationship which brought the client in. And then from there, you would solve multiple problems all in one place, all at a discounted, price or rate. And the ability to, similar to a GP, I guess, you go there, they have the long-standing relationship, they get to know you, they get to know your family. But then when you have, things that need attending to, they'll send you to a specialist with a brief and get you back once the work has been done, and so on. So that was essentially the concept. And 37 years later, if my maths is right, we've developed a much broader business with those service lines. I think we've got something like 14 service lines now within the business.
Yep, and all internal.
All internal. All our staff are salaried. We gave up commissions and things many years ago, at least a decade ago. We're early adopters. So all the advice is non-conflicted. It's all billable. It's all disclosed. There's no conflict. And being the most trusted advisor, whether you're coming in from sort of a financial planning, which is the origins of our business, financial planning, and then broadly financial services, which then incorporated accounting. So accounting goes back a decade now, back to the Crowe acquisition.
Yes.
But it, regardless of what the primary relationship is now, you're in an ecosystem where you can access multiple services, fully integrated, fully digitized, and non-conflicted.
We'll talk a little bit about the tech soon, because I know that's been a major part of it. But when you talk about, and again, the financial index, then the Crowe, which was the accounting business, coming into that, what was the most difficult to get on top of? Was it systems, processes? Was it the people? The integration, I can imagine, would have been huge.
Yeah, when we bought that business, we had done previous to that, the team had done 40 or 50 acquisitions, tuck-ins, mergers, different size, but predominantly in the financial planning area, not in accounting. There was some accounting content attaching to those. Some of these people ran an accountancy business as well as a financial planning business. So when the opportunity arose to buy Crowe, which was really a broken business, essentially. It not only, if you do the numbers, was it well priced, so to speak, but it had a succession of regimes through there, a lot of independent directors on boards, and really, and I think this is public knowledge. This is not me having a bitch in the background, but really, the business had been run into the ground, and it was a bit of a basket case. So, as we normally do, we probably underestimated the amount of work that needs to go into that, because we were very proficient in buying financial planning businesses and some accounting businesses, but this was a big beast, right? We had thousands of staff, 100 odd offices, lots of regional places. I know Spiro and the team in particular did almost a presidential 90 days, first 90 days, where they literally did planes, trains, and automobiles, and visited every office, literally, both in Australia and New Zealand. It was an amazing effort, almost ridiculously done, but it was similar to what's going on in the US. Because I think Spiro is quoted somewhere as saying that from the previous 2 or 3 CEOs, they hadn't visited more than, say, half a dozen offices. They never got out of head office to go and visit the colonies, so to speak, to get
Yeah.
to Dubbo, to go to Invercargill, to go to Perth and everywhere in between, Tassie and the rest. So I think that was just a sign of goodwill to the people to say, look, we're here. You've heard it all before, but this could be a different journey. And then probably if you it was a combination of trying to manage systems and processes. But I think personally that the culture was probably the most difficult part. And culture relies often to get people to change the way that they go about things, is to build a safe place, a place of trust, because they're not going to really let you know what they're thinking unless they feel that they are heard well and the environment is trusted. And that's not easy to build when you have lots and lots of people. Remember, the Findex business went from sort of 300 people to 3,000 people overnight. It's a massive, massive change in scale. And whilst the systems and processes we had built and eventually rolled out have held it together and kept the efficiencies, I think a lot of work's been gone into the cultural side of it, what I call the dynamics over the years. So it's probably taken 5 years of the last 10 years to really get to that safe place. And now we're building that momentum, similar to what I was describing, the way I like to get up in the morning. You've got to get to a point and then just build off the back of that. So hopefully that answers your question, but it's been a massive effort by the team.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's an interesting when you use the word a safe place, because sometimes, I don't know, there could be 100 sort of businesses on this right now. There's people sometimes don't even know how to describe culture. It's a difficult one to actually talk about. And if you guys are online now, you guys can talk about it, and maybe in your next team meeting, what is culture to you? Now, you've just shared that it was about building a safe place for people. And I've never heard that reference to it before, but I can definitely see it in terms of how important that was to go from 300 to 3,000 and make sure people felt safe. Yeah. And you've obviously been able to do that quite well.
Yeah, Paul, that term comes out of the sporting arena often. We were early adopters in our original Findex business with leading teams. You may know that organisation. They had a fabulous track record of, particularly the AFL and NRL, of working with any given team. I think Ray McLean's book is called Any Given Team. And a lot of it was dealing with the mechanics, the structural stuff, the everyday, the systems and processes and what you want to achieve. And then the dynamics around how teams interact with each other. And the prerequisite there is a safe place. It's to create an environment where the rookie, the junior, the most recent hired person, and the most senior person in the organisation are heard. They may be heard differently. I mean, obviously there's respect for in amongst all of that, but the ability to create a place where somebody is prepared to speak up. It's part of the trademark, and it's also enforced through behaviours. People talk a lot about this stuff, about culture and all of that, but then their behaviours don't show that. They go, they'll have a cultural day and everyone will get really excited and hug each other, but they go to work the next day and their actions around that office, around that business, aren't reflective of what was discussed the day before. It's fake, right? You can't live. So finding that balance and then creating the systems to back that up really allows you to sort of turbocharge any business.
Has you spoke about the 300 to 3,000. Has the strategy changed along the way? And if so, why?
Everything gets tweaked along the way, but broadly speaking, no. I guess we're probably and thinking in the other way. How do we continue to grow? A lot of the work. I'm non-executive in the Findex business. I'm a non-executive chairman and founder. Spiro and I, as we said, founded that business. So I get a bit of a look-see into the business through board meetings and monthly management meetings, which I attend. Funnily enough, one of the unintended consequences of COVID, as we're doing on this call now, is we force people online, right? Trying to get Zoom calls without COVID would have taken many years, if ever.
Yep.
It was a bit like 9/11 changed the way we fly in planes and so on and so on. So it was one of those moments in history which changed that. But it's allowed me to participate a hell of a lot more in the business, because I don't have to be on planes and trains to get to management meetings.
Yes.
And board meetings are generally, as best as we can, held in person. They are quarterly, but there are monthly updates. And working our way through that, I can bring in, I operate on a global basis. A lot of our family office startups and businesses that we've built and invested in work in different time zones and different regions. And you get a global feel to it. So when you come back to Australia and New Zealand, as much as it's a very livable place, you're bringing in a view that maybe out of New York. I spent a lot of time in Abu Dhabi and New York and other parts of the world. And you bring in a global challenge. You're sort of challenging the guys that when they think they've made it, and if you're measuring by people, 3,000 people is a lot of people. It's not. There's no reason the Findex can't be a global business. What we do is quite unique. As I said, I travel the world. I've not found any other jurisdiction, whether it be Europe or US, Asia proper, that's doing anything remotely close to what we do with the scale that we currently have.
Wow. Well, congratulations to that.
Well, it's being built. Spiro and I don't celebrate very often. It's one of the criticisms we get in our feedback sessions, that everyone would love us to see us celebrate more. We for whatever reason, we're poor celebrators. I've sort of got to fake the celebration a little bit.
The strategy with regards to, let's say, regional, is that something that is still continuing to build and grow?
Yeah, I think previous regimes of the Crowe business, Crowe gave us regional.
Right.
You'll find the big four operate out of the major cities, and I might have 9 or 10 offices, but we've got 110, 120 offices, 20 in New Zealand, I think, or 90. So I've lost a little bit of track there, but it's that number. It's very close to that number. And the previous regime, the business that we bought, couldn't see that was actually an advantage, and really were modelling themselves on, the usual four, the big end of town, when actually their USP, their unique selling proposition, was really the fact that they were distributed. Yep. And they had close relationships in those communities. Yes. So that, if you needed a job lot done, you could fly a tax guy to Mildura or somewhere, but they'd only spend the day there. We'd be better off using our local partner, our local tech expert that could tap into, through technology, a much broader community, a global community. But on the Saturday, his kids would play netball with the clients' kids. And that's very, very, very powerful in any business, not just in the businesses that we're in. That's just good business. And it fascinates me that a board of directors and senior management being paid big bucks couldn't see that.
Now, I want to take you back to 87. You mentioned 1987. It was a good year. Carlton won the premiership that year.
Of course.
Footy comes into it somehow. What was the goal in mind when you were sitting there around the dinner table, and how has that changed more recently as we sit here in the end of 2024 heading into 2025? Has the goal changed? What is still the goal?
No, the goal hasn't changed. I mean, we've added bits, of course, yeah. But our core ideology, our compass hasn't changed. Funnily enough, the business plan is probably on that same page. It's changed in terms of the inputs. Technology's come along. As I said, it was almost a pre-digital business. We've gone through that. We're now in a sustainability phase. I spend a lot of my time on a day-to-day basis in plant-based foods and new technologies and what is now morphed to be sustainability. In the early days, digital was just the third revolution. We had agriculture, first revolution. We then had the industrial revolution. Henry Ford created the production line. You got a black car, whether you liked it or not. Then the digital revolution, and I've lived through this. When I graduated from uni and got my first job, you'd come back to the office and there'd be like a nail, and you'd have messages on there, and you'd call someone back and write them a letter and get a letter back 6 weeks later. It was wonderful, right? And there was typing pools and the rest. And now we're entering the sustainable revolution. Sustainability will be ultimately not this sort of agnostic, this idea out here. It'll be embedded in everything that we do. You know, it's sort of a stakeholder view of the world, where you move away from sort of shareholder to stakeholder, looking at all of the parties.
Yep.
You know, employees, clients, shareholders, and everyone outside of that, governments and regulators and the rest, and making your decision making coming from a view where you're trying to be as homogenous and pleasing to all of those parties. Sometimes it can distract you or make it more difficult to do stuff. But if you measure in the long term, it's more what I call enduring. It lasts longer. It's a harder path, but you're making harder decisions. They're not just today decisions, they're longer decisions. And, you know, it's something that I've embraced at a personal level with a lot of our family office projects and businesses. But I think Findex is now on that journey. I insisted that we needed to have an ESG program within the business. It's now become a big part of what we do. And final words, I've probably bamboozled a few people listening to this, but, you know, 30 years ago, the computer guy didn't exist as he was known then, sort of a nuts and bolts computer guy. And then he became the IT guy. And then he became the CIO, a C-suite or a CTO, you know, C-suite executive sitting next to the COO and the CFO and all of that. Sustainability is on that journey, that a CSO or, you know, Chief Sustainability Officer will be sitting at the boardroom table, influencing directions of companies globally. There's a pincer movement going on. I call it a pincer movement at the moment, where you've got governments just starting to regulate. It's happened now in Australia in the last couple of months for larger, you know, over $500 million turnover businesses. But eventually that'll filter down to the SMEs and everyday businesses, where, you know, the way we hire, the way we fire, the way we produce products and services around, you know, carbon footprints and all of the others, and the way we do business, the way we pay our taxes and everything else, will be governed by this mindset, this stakeholder mindset. And coming in the other direction to create that perfect pincer are consumers, our clients. They're voting with their feet. You know, I was looking at sort of retail sales. Some of our work is in retail. A sustainably driven brand is probably 6 times more likely to be purchased on shelf than something that doesn't tick that box. So people are yearning for that. They're looking for that. They want to be kind to the planet. They want to be kind to, you know, God's everything, and kind to themselves. So why wouldn't we get up in the morning and try to, you know, do that stuff?
You mentioned digital before and how that all transformed. Tell us about the digital department that you guys have created in Findex and how that digital tech is continuing to drive the future of Findex.
Yeah, in fact, if you really looked at Findex, you know, other than the people and the scale and the stuff that we've talked about, at its heart, we're actually a fintech business. We're probably more a fintech business than a financial planning business or an accounting business and all of the other service lines that we provide to clients. I think it's at the heart and soul. The reason being is, you know, those systems that digitization can produce means that you can replicate an experience time and time and time again. Obviously, good people and good relationships are part of it, but having, Findex is one of the only businesses, financial services businesses in the world, or professional services businesses in the world, that is ISO accredited. We actually have an ISO accreditation. I don't know if you know much about ISO, but ISO is normally accredited to manufacturing. You know, I ran a dairy business for 13 years, and attaining the highest level of accreditation, if you want to deal with exporting or with large retailers, is to have ISO accreditation. The reason it's normally associated to manufacturing is because you've got machines, and machines just, you know, once they're well oiled and everything's going, they'll just keep doing what they're doing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When you come into professional services, you're dealing with people. And people like to do things differently. We're all different and we need to respect that. But even the same person, they can get it right one day and maybe having a bad day, they may not get it as right. So technology and digitization of those systems and processes and procedures mean that it takes that sort of top and bottom end out and gives a very replicatable experience to the client each and every time. The client doesn't want to be disappointed. Truly, they don't care if you're having a bad day. They might be respectful of it, but they've got a problem or they need something from you, and you need to be on your best all the time. And the way to do that is to digitize and have at the heart and soul of your business, a big digital footprint underpinning it.
Has that now formed into, let's call it, I know, whether it be data centers and artificial intelligence driving a lot of that as well. Have you that automation piece and making sure that AI is playing a part of that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. If you're not doing AI, if your staff or you are not daily, hourly using AI, even as a tool to do background work, let alone special applications to help you with your work, then you're already 1 foot out the door. I mean, there'll be people on this call. I remember, just with computers going years, 20, 30 years ago, they could probably see the finish line in their careers and were thinking, look, if I hold on for long enough, I might just get over that line before these computer newfangled things, and they were trying to get the whiteout off the screen, right? They'll instead of hitting the delete button or the edit button. But AI is here. There's a lot written about it, and I'm no expert, but I started. We built a technology platform for our water business, going in partnership with Fujitsu. Started the process about 3 years ago. I was talking to a blockchain specialist, a guy by the name of Frederick de Broek, fabulous name. And this guy's out of the box. He's sort of a 45-year-old guy with a mohawk. He'd come to a meeting. He didn't have the mohawk one day and he had the mohawk at the next meeting. So it sort of tells you he's a little bit out there. But a great guy. And he started telling me more than 2 years ago, pre-ChatGPT, this AI stuff was taking 5 days of his work and he could reproduce it in about 5 hours. He was saying it was saving him a huge amount of time, which intrigued me because I tend to be a bit of an early adopter to this stuff. Mm-hmm. So I went looking and found a lot of good stuff. I mean, there's a lot of hocus pocus out there too, but I think running away from AI is not the way to go. I think embracing it even at a basic level and just subscribing to ChatGPT or Perplexity or any of those versions of it will yield a lot. It is at the core of what we do. Findex, I think our digital team, and I'm going to get this very wrong, Paul, would have a minimum of 60 people, probably 100 people in that department. Yeah, it'd be that, probably more, but I know it'd be that sort of number. I can put it into the chat later if anyone's interested, but probably not. But essentially, that parts of that team have been playing with AI in order to be the next iteration. So in that third revolution of digital, AI is the next iteration within that, right? And it's going to disrupt professional services. If you're in basic, AC and tax and audit in particular, there is enormous disruption coming, and it's coming faster than most people think. I've seen trials. I can think of one testimonial that we looked at where we did an AI audit and we did a human audit, and AI was 97%, I think was the number. It's 97, 98% accurate, which is remarkable in a real client audit, just to benchmark some of the work that was going on. And then when we dug deeper, and this does your head in when you think about it, the reason there was a 2 or 3% discrepancy was AI was actually 100% accurate, and the human audit had fault. So the discrepancy was actually the other way around. That the normal audit, so to speak, was actually had a couple of mistakes in it. So AI got it 100% right. So if that doesn't scare the hell out of auditors, you know, on this podcast, then it's food for thought. It doesn't mean we should all be hanging off a bridge somewhere. I think there's, you know, there's middle ground, and it will be used, I think, certainly initially as a tool to help validate and speed up and do probably more for the client than a total disruptor to put a whole bunch of people out of work. But yeah, it's here to stay.
100%. And I think again, looking at some of the research around even some of the, you know, like the bots that are being created now that have been designed to work with firms to take away all that low end work that a bot that works 24/7 can actually do. So when you talk about disruption, and, you know, that was the word we always use when tech giants were coming through, is it a disruptor? And you absolutely, I agree 100% with what you're saying in terms of it's here. It's about how you embrace it and then how you work with it.
Well, by embracing it, Paul, you take it from being a disruptor, which is sort of a connotation, you know, it's almost a negative word, and converting it to an enabler. It's switching the view to sort of say, well, if we run away and we're fearful of it, then it's going to get us. If we embrace it and understand it and then apply it in a positive way, it can enable a lot more to happen. It can free up time, it can free up opportunity, it can free up discussions with clients.
Now, whether it's 300 or 3,000 that you went to in team members, it's probably more than that now, as I'm sure you're doing a lot more acquisitions and tuck-ins. How do you maintain the client focus? You know, whether it be 60 to 100 or in your dig team, to what's the importance or the key factor in making sure that client focus remains a focus?
Yeah, look, it's one of those that's one of those questions that I think fundamentally any business has the same purpose, right? I think the best businesses you build. I was watching something off what's his name, Kevin O'Leary, this morning. Just came through on my feed. He was doing a sidewalk stop in New York, and they were asking basically this question, funnily enough, and his answer is probably the same answer I would give coincidentally, is that he loves to build demand-driven businesses. I think I do a lot of shark tanking of my own with our family office. We invest in startups, you know, in our little garage there. And we go through this commercialization, corporatization process with them on a journey. But essentially, we like to invest in demand-driven businesses. So not an invention of a widget that I've got to convince you need one.
Yes.
But to find a friction, what we call a friction point in people's lives. You know, there's lots of friction in our lives, whether we're stuck in traffic or things aren't happening the way we wanted to. So anyone that can take friction out of people's lives generates a value.
Okay.
Now, what that value is, it'll depend on the friction and where you are. But essentially, a demand-driven business that's client-focused is the same whether it's Findex or ABC Co doing whatever it is up and down the high street. There's no difference, and the client has to come first. I mean, a couple of months ago, we were at our 100-leader conference up on the Gold Coast, and this was a really, you know, these are our 100 leaders within the company, you know, from both Australia and New Zealand. And I think you just got to say it in a way where people say, oh, you always talk about the client coming first and that. But genuinely, I believe Findex has that at the heart of what we do. They are the most important people in that stakeholder equation. If they lose interest, the rest just turns, I think there's a technical term, turns to shit.
Do you do anything different, obviously, with the research that you've got access to, whether it be international? Do you guys at Findex focus on something different that you can share with everyone online, or is that IP?
Oh, there's no IP. I think it's a composition. I mean, everyone's going to be different. You know, you don't want to come on these podcasts and think, you always hate that kid at the front of the class. It's, you know, answering every question, and the kids at the back of the class, you probably don't like them for different reasons. I always used to like to sit in the middle of the class, right? Then I'd always say to the kid at the front of the class, let somebody else answer one of them. We know you know, but just let that kid. It's good for his, you know, morale, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no special sauce. There's nothing. It's just a way of, you know, Spiro and I often talk about bike. Probably bike riders on this call. I don't ride a bike. I just think I'd love to, but I just worry about cars. You know, I find other ways. But so there are a lot of bike builders in the world, people that build bikes and they build fast bikes and mountain bikes and all of that. And then there are a lot of bike riders in the world, and they're pretty good and do it to, you know, fabulous levels. There are very few people that can ride a bike and build it at the same time. And you may remember, I think we talked about this when you came into the office that couple of years ago when it was, and Spiro and I were on the couch just talking about this. It's sort of a bit of a Paulism, if that's a word, where we talk about the bike builder and the bike rider. You know, it's almost like being able to focus immediately in front and then look up to the horizon. Often it's blurred when you look back because, you know, you're trying to just get that perspective. And I think that is the sinister source. That's the uniqueness, I guess, about Findex, that we embrace that, and we've learned to do a lot of that.
Yeah, brilliant. No, you're right. I do remember that, and I think it was a fun little discussion on the sofa that day. It was in your garage that you refer to.
Yes, a fancy garage.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's not.
But it was a garage once upon it. It was literally a garage.
It's not the same garage that I've got here, though.
No. Well, what do you do?
No, it's good. Let's talk about the term wealth accounting and how important that is to you guys, and, you know, what does that mean?
Well, wealth accounting is actually a personification of Findex, the index of services. So as we're saying, historically, we were a wealth business.
Yep.
And then started to acquire accountancy practices, and then obviously Crowe being the larger one of those. We've done others around it, tuck-ins and others, and continue to do that. And we were looking for a way, a mindset, a descriptor, you know, the elevator. What do you do? And wealth accounting seemed to be a logical place, because if you think about that client contact, there's really only the only questions that clients want to know, or that I would ask a client, is what keeps you up at night? That's a really simple question that no one ever, you know, we get so technical and try to teach people how smart we are and all that. Clients aren't interested. They want us to solve that problem.
Correct.
At 2 o'clock in the morning when they're staring at the ceiling, if somebody could fix that for me, you know, I'd pay, or I'd do, and I'd love them forever. So that, and really the rest is around creating wealth, protecting wealth, growing wealth, and transferring wealth. There's only 4 quadrants that any business of what we do in professional service will be operating in. What services you bring it in, how you vend it in, how you get paid, all of that, what the customer experience like. Ultimately, that's it. Making it, protecting it, growing it, transferring it. That's what people are really interested in. And the more we can do around that, and wow them in a customer experience, you know, the more successful we'll be.
You know, we're coming into a new calendar year soon. I know I was already in 2025 30 minutes ago, but we're coming into the 25 calendar year, which is hard to believe. But can you challenge your current business model to think about the 4 things that Terry just said then? So there's a little bit of a challenge for everybody out there. But I'd like to talk to you about your capital partners. I know, obviously, the Crowe business, and you've had some very good capital partners. You okay to talk about the importance of KKR to the business, and now Mercury Capital? I think there was an announcement. Was it maybe 12 months ago, or maybe
recently?
It was recent. Yep.
Yeah, recently, very recent.
So tell us about that. And I think, you know, there's often firms that I know, firms that I've worked with in the past as well, that they want to grow by acquisition, and you guys have done that successfully. And obviously you've had a very good, obviously KKR has been very good with you guys up until more recently with Mercury coming through. You okay to run through the capital partnership path?
Yeah, no, it's not a problem. It's a big topic area, but, you know, we could sort of dumb it down. In fact, we've had 3 private equity firms. We had Macquarie originally,
Okay.
Macquarie Bank, and then KKR, and most recently our friends in Mercury. All very different. Obviously, Macquarie Australian based with you know, global aspirations. KKR, big
Yeah.
probably, one of the biggest private equity firms in the world, out of New York. Different dynamics. And then Mercury, more boutique, a different selling proposition from them to us in terms of more hands-on. I think a sort of closer to a $2 billion fund. I think KKR probably spend, that they spill that on the way to the coffee machine every morning. So very different dynamics and a lot to learn from those relationships. But I guess professional services has struggled with this. I think I remember being at a conference when KKR came on board about 9 years ago. That's their timeline. They gave us 5 to 7 years in their cycle, but we added a couple for COVID. I think it was difficult times to really do much, for them and us to move on. But it's a natural cycle. They want to get in, they want to get out. At a point, that's just how that business runs and how they manage their funds. But essentially, there was a lot of nervousness from the partner group about, what does this mean? Private equity isn't always a good brand to bring into some businesses because they have a reputation of, plumping up the numbers, taking costs out, pumping up the numbers, and then turning it over, flogging it to some unsuspecting poor person along that. The fact that we've gone to 3 private equity firms hopefully holds us in good stead because they know the routine, so they've probably done all of the DD. But essentially, professional services have struggled with the concept, and maybe a little bit of that is to do with the professional services themselves as to their investment grade. Because if you think about, the big 4 type of scenario that it is a federation of businesses. It's not, Findex is a corporate model. We've always been a corporate model. The company owns all the clients. Staff are fully salaried, non-conflicted, non-commissioned employees. Sure, there's incentives, there's STIs and LTIs and all the rest in there. But essentially, the firm owns the clients. Whereas a partnership model is, it's a federation of businesses with a managing partner maybe and support services to go around it. And if somebody cracks the shits, they leave and take their clients and take their staff and so on and so on. So when capital is looking for a home, it will find the most profitable model. Capital will always find a good business. It's just a mantra, a global mantra, So when they're looking to invest, they'll invest in something that, guarantees ownership, has systems, processes and procedures, has a strong culture, strong management team, good numbers, and can perform, put on the hook. Now, you can get that in the traditional professional services model, but for whatever reason, there hasn't been a lot of investment going into that channel ever, really. There have been little bits. And it may be now a time when it's the right time for that to happen, where money will go into those. But you can see, without being controversial, how a business like PwC can, largely disintegrate in front of your eyes, lose $1 billion in value in fees almost overnight through one partner doing the wrong thing. I mean, it can happen to any business. It's not just that business, but those vagaries, those uncertainties, often the private equity guys have probably stood back and said, well, maybe not. So our journey's been really good. It hasn't always been easy. Private equity are pretty tough people to deal with. But if you know their mindset, their mentality, as I call it, and you can find a way, a common ground, and it's not just profit. I think ultimately it's underpinned. We are a business. You can have a good journey with them. You can actually take the pressure of growth capital, how are we going to grow, away for a period of time, which frees up the management team to focus on the day-to-day stuff and actually implement the business plan as such. And they also bring in other smarts around, leveraging their relationships external to our business. They can drag in resources that you may struggle to firstly fund and even find. So it can be a really, really good model. And we've certainly now been doing it since 2007, I think, 7, 8. Yeah.
Well, there's always, I suppose you're right. If you look at the scale of like a KKR to, again, I don't know a lot about Mercury, more boutique that you've mentioned, and they're going to be your continued capital partner as such. So Mercury took out KKR?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
It's published in the OFR. 40%, it was a direct swap, basically. 40 went out and they came in for 40. But the mentality of that team and that fund is very, very different. Great track record of working with founder partners. That was one thing that excited us about it. I think they've got something like 24 or 22 portfolio companies, different verticals, logistics and different sort of manufacturing. But they like to get in close and dirty with the founders and the management team. Whereas KKR are very much numbers driven.
Yes.
Very different mentality. Both have their pluses and minuses. You just got to find, because I manage the board, obviously that's the key part of my role. Where does sort of operational and management decision making start and finish with the board? I think if the board's trying to work out what the turning circle of the company car is, it's probably too deep into the business. But if there's this point, this cusp where the board can get to it and add value and stop, and then empower the C-suite and the key leaders, the KRMs and others to go out and implement the plan.
Yeah, good. Well, you spoke about that a little bit before in terms of, so you have 4 board meetings a year, and then do you have monthly meetings in between that, do you?
Yeah, we sort of have many board meetings, I guess, they've morphed into. We're still finding KKR was 4 and only 4. Okay. Mercury, as I said, are more hands-on, so their preference has been to have these monthly minis. Okay. They sort of go for a couple of hours, and we don't go deep into some parts of the board papers. But they're sort of KPI driven. The quarterly meetings are full day meetings, and our C-suite report in, and they're proper. I mean it's very disciplined. Findex is an unlisted public company, so we could flick the switch and go to an IPO if we wanted to, and all of the reporting. I mean, we have external. We got Deloitte that do our audit. Heaven help us. That's a bit of a joke at the AGM where we've got the Deloitte guy sitting in the front row. Well, you've got to do it, and they're good guys. We like our friends at Deloitte.
Obviously, you spoke about the board. I want to just come back to, I'll say a couple of years now. I know time flies pretty quickly, but there were some more recent changes. You're chairman, you're still kept chairman, but Spiro went to managing director. You brought on some joint CEOs. What was the thought process behind that, and how successful has that been?
Yeah, look, no one's left the building, as I say, because people think, because you're making changes. If anything, we've actually bolstered the C-suite by bringing in Leanne Bolton in a CFO role, and a new operational role, which has pushed our previous CFO, Matt Games, who's been with us, who we poached effectively out of Macquarie originally. Into a CEO, a joint CEO role. He's been with us for, I think it's nearly 15 years. And Tony Roussos, who came out of a COO role into the other half of the CEO's role, the joint CEO's role, who's just clocked up over 30 years with us. Still a young guy. So, he started at reception type scenario and then worked his way through the business. So we love to grow our own people. I think that adds to the culture as well. So operationally, day to day, they're managing the business down, if that makes sense. And Spiro's been pushed up into the managing director role. May not be traditionally how the structures work, and his role is more strategic these days. Right. So he sort of manages up into the board, and is sort of the linchpin between the board and our quarterly meetings and reporting and the day-to-day C-suite. Even though he's part of that, it's almost like a little triangle there, right? So, but his focus is on big projects like AI. That whole project sits under him now, and other big sort of strategic, visionary leader type things that we're doing. Big, even the ESG, he's very hands-on with that. Had to convince him hard to get there, but we got there, and he loves it now, I think. He doesn't call climate change voodoo anymore, which is a bit funny. You may have remembered some of that. I think he actually believes in it these days. So anyway, another story for another day. It should get us both on one day. That'd be really exciting.
Yeah, that would be good.
Maybe not. But yeah, so that's how it's morphed. You know, we're learning
Yes.
what works. We're also thinking it takes a bit of that day-to-day pressure off Spiro too. I mean, he's going to work like myself too, you know, forever.
Yeah.
But he spends a big portion of the year overseas working remotely. He's really embraced digital. You know, the digital. His great mantra pre-digital was, you don't in our Findex business, you don't have to work in a big city to have a big job. I can vividly remember pre-COVID going, we would take 2 of the 4 meetings to the regions. So we would go to Invercargill for a board meeting, fly all the directors down. We'd visit clients on one day and have the board meeting the second day. You know, we'd literally hop into buses and go and do all of that. And I can remember having a board meeting in Ballarat, and we were having afternoon sort of tea, drinks, whatever you want to call it, with the local staff in the office there. It was a new office, so we were, you know, really happy to be there. Spiro said a few words, and it really resonated with the young folk in particular, because there's a pressure in your career path at a point. Remember, this is pre-COVID. This is before Zoom and Teams and all the rest. And Spiro was saying, well, mate, you don't have to leave your community and your family. You can still live and work here, and not have to leave your community to have a job, because we were so, you know, we had technology so much embedded in everything that Findex do, Fintech, basically, yes. as we said earlier. Then COVID hit and everyone sort of caught up. So, but that still applies to the way we run our business.
So that brings in a lot of flexibility. Is that what we're talking about? Because I know there's a lot of different businesses out there that, you know, I suppose
Look, our family office has a different model, the one I like personally. We do a Monday in the office. We've experimented. Monday in the office, we have our meetings early in the morning. Not first thing, we'll let everyone get their feet under the table. Have our meetings. Tuesday out of office, it's a catch-up day. You know, you can do it from wherever you want to do that. Wednesday, back in, hump day. You know, how are we going? Are we on target for the week? Thursday, back out, catch up again. And then Friday's always got a better vibe to it. You know, just traditionally, I think, you know, the Monday to Friday, people are in a better mood Friday. The footy's on the next day or whatever that night. And the mentality is a little bit different. And it works really, really well for our family office. It's a little office, you know, it's not a big, you know, hundreds of people type thing. Findex works very differently. The regions probably are more in line with that, I think, the regional offices. They really didn't suffer COVID and stuff as much as the you know, places like Melbourne. And we leave it up to you know, the advisors or the accountants or the KRM to build their own. They can design as much or as little interaction as they like. They run their teams as long as they're hitting their numbers, which they are. In fact, when we went to distributed workforce, I think our productivity went up 5%. Okay. So it can be done well, keeping in mind we have really detailed task management embedded in our business, stuff we started 25 years ago.
Okay.
One way, best way, we call it. You know, whether you're making a cup of coffee, opening the front door, or doing some complex transaction, it's set out very clearly and goes into, you know, what manufacturing would call an ERP system. So it all the bits connect. There's complete visibility. There are timelines attaching to it. So people are well trained to it.
Yes.
And if you like that and you like the culture, then you're going to stay for a long time. And you can do it from home in your jammies, or you can do it from the office if you like.
Okay. Brilliant. Well, there's then some good tips for. I know there's businesses still that are struggling, whether they're in the financial services or call it the wealth, financial planning, or in the accounting, for the same struggling with that mix. And I know certainly city-based businesses, I know you're not quite city-based, but you're on the fringe of the CBD there, and it's the yeah, they're trying to obviously force people back into the workforce, but it's not what people want either. You know, we've had this flexibility, and I'm all for it in terms of having the flexibility, because I can be very productive and I know I can do everything that I need to do. But I think that's the biggest fear for most business owners, that, well, are they going to be productive? Are they going to be working 9 to 5? I won't be able to see them. What do you say to the people that are thinking like that, that maybe need to change the way that they think?
Well, again, one size doesn't fit all. I mean, a lot of it's around that mentality. What it did do is COVID broke open that partner mentality where you had to see everyone sitting outside your office. And a lot of it goes on trust, but it also needs to be underpinned by behaviours, systems, and accountability, right? You've got to hit your numbers. I mean, we'll let you stay home in your jammies, but for some days. But I think, how we talked about enablers, I think you can switch it on to take friction out of your own life. I mean, if you can get a long commute, it may not make sense to be in the office every day. But if I was a young person, if I was, going back all those years ago, 40 years ago when I started work, I would be in the office even if I didn't need to be in the office. I encourage people at the front end of their careers to be there, and I think you'll learn a lot being around people as well. It's not just the actual hard yakka work that you have to do. You can be influenced by just how people go about, managing relationships. The dynamics are very, very different to even this call. And as effective as this is, if we were sitting having a coffee in the office like we did last time, you're just going to get that little premium, that just the way you go about it. I'll pick up mannerisms. I'm a big reader of body language. I've had to do it sort of looking over. Oh yeah, I can see you're in your shorts. That's good. I told you to not do your shorts when you do these shows. It's terrible. You could be reading the news as well. But seriously, I think it will be different. But I certainly encourage younger people to just maybe get into the office a little bit more, even if it's not mandated. And it's often older people that probably, because they've had a tradition of not doing it this way, need to let go a little bit and build that infrastructure and trust in their teams. To let people grow and maybe do it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think it is that, it's, as you said, it's that building of that trust, I feel, that comes into it, and making sure that they can be trusted, and they felt like they can be trusted. And I think it'll come back as well. I think, and the statistics are showing that right now in terms of, let's call it productivity gains, and you spoke about it just before. But you've got to build that trust into your team, and not get upset with them because they may not be online at whatever time it is, but are they actually achieving what they needed to achieve for the day and for the week and for the month and for the quarter?
Yeah, it'll find its level. I think we can get too anxious. Of course, we've got day-to-day responsibilities and all of the stuff that we need to pay the bank back its money and all of that stuff. I get it. It's not we can talk in theory here, but the world has a way of getting in the way. But I think time will find its level. It will. It'll create a natural order, and we'll find the best way to go about it.
Stuart's asked the question here. Fascinating interview. Thanks, Terry. I realise Findex is a fintech business, but all of the choices to invest in something, why professional services? Not as scalable? Question mark, question mark.
Professional services is scalable. It's very, very much scalable if you build the systems and processes and procedures. We were born, if you like, into financial services. If you remember, when I graduated, there wasn't a financial planning industry. It was really people being poached out of banking, out of insurance, out of, it was a made-up industry. Obviously, it's not now. There's a huge demand as we continue to get older, certainly in Australian demographics and most of the Western or developed world, we are growing. There is a huge once-in-a-lifetime transition of wealth going from one generation. It was those 4 boxes. That last box, really, really important. How do we get it there safely? And how do we inspire them to get back to the front of the queue and grow it more and protect it more and so on? So It is scalable. It is replicatable. You can do it through systems, and that's where the technology comes in. That at the heart of it, we're trying to have the experience. So what we do is we create, I guess technology, this is a good way to explain it, Paul, just thinking it through. Technology gives you like guardrails. It gives you a structure, but it's not totally planned. We allow flexibility for people to be people and tailor stuff to their own devices, their own way of doing it. But ultimately, if we can keep the guardrail, sometimes it may be very narrow if it needs to be an audit, but other times it could be a little bit more creative if it's, you know, solving other problems in some of the other services that we have. But professional services in the traditional sense, the federated model is less scalable. That's why it hasn't found that private equity capital as easily. Professional services and the way we do it, I think, is enormously scalable. And, you know, the next chapter of Findex, and I would challenge Findex, and I know Spiro believes in this, is to go global, is to literally take this to somewhere like the US. You know, I can knock on KKR's door again and say, look, you remember us. There's 350 million people here. We want to do it again because there's no one over here doing it.
Any final words from yourself? You know, a big thank you. I know time is precious, and I know we've been on here for a good hour and 20 minutes or so, and I always love catching up. We just don't do it in person anymore. But it's always great chatting to you because the insights and the little 1%ers that I can take away in terms of my continued learning and all the little things that you triggered, even the built to last before with that little quote, so important to just business, everyday life and business, and the lessons have been outstanding. Anything you'd like to share before we wrap up?
No, just more so to thank you as per usual. You're always generous with your own times, and you know, you got your own style, and I'm sure the people have hopefully got some value out of one of the pearls of wisdom somewhere. But you know, happy to invest and happy to participate, and thank you again.